My name is Mary, and I still remember the first days when love quietly walked into my life. Those days were filled with shy smiles, racing hearts, and silent hopes that felt bigger than the world itself. Love didn't come crashing in like a storm. It arrived gently, changing everything in ways I never imagined. The first days of love aren't just memories, they're moments that shape your soul forever. I remember it so clearly now, though at the time it felt like nothing special at all. I was Mary, just an ordinary girl living ordinary days, lost in the routine of work, study, and quiet evenings at home. My life had its share of laughter and sadness, but it was calm, predictable, almost like a melody that played softly in the background. And maybe that's why love found me in the most unexpected way, when I wasn't even looking. It was early spring. The air still carried a bit of winter's chill, but the sun had begun to stay longer in the sky. The city felt lighter somehow, as if it too was ready for something new. On that day, I was on my way to a small bookshop I often visited after work. It wasn't anything fancy, just an old shop tucked between a bakery and a florist, but it was my little escape. The smell of books, the soft music playing in the corner, and the sight of handwritten notes left by strangers on the notice board, all of it felt like a secret world where I could breathe. As I walked through the door that day, the familiar bell above the entrance rang, and I didn't notice anyone else at first. I remember brushing a strand of hair behind my ear and stepping into the aisle where the poetry books lived. My fingers traced the covers absent-mindedly, not really reading, just feeling. And that's when I heard his voice, a gentle voice, asking if I could recommend a book. I turned around, surprised, and there he was. He wasn't what people might call strikingly handsome. His hair was a little messy, and he wore a simple navy sweater, but there was something about his eyes, kind, searching, and a bit shy, that made my heart pause for a moment. I smiled politely and suggested a book I had just finished reading, hoping he wouldn't see the slight blush on my cheeks. He thanked me, and we spoke for a few more moments about poetry, the smell of old pages, and how beautiful it was that words written long ago could still make someone feel something today. Even now, thinking back, I realize I didn't know it was love beginning right there in that small aisle under the flickering yellow light. It felt like a conversation, simple and warm, nothing more. But sometimes love starts not with a grand gesture, but with the softest hello. We met again purely by chance, or so I believed at the time. A few days later, I returned to the shop, and there he was again, standing by the philosophy section this time. He smiled, a little embarrassed, and admitted he'd hoped to see me there. My heart did that strange, fluttering thing again, and I remember laughing softly, surprised and a little nervous. We talked more that day, about books, about music, about how we both preferred quiet cafes over crowded places. He told me his name was Ethan, and I told him mine. Looking back, I wonder how differently life could have turned out if I hadn't gone to the bookshop that day. But love doesn't follow plans or timetables. It finds you in the spaces between your daily worries and dreams. And for me, it found me when my guard was down, when I was just Mary, not trying to impress anyone. The days that followed felt like walking in a gentle rain. We exchanged phone numbers, sent each other short messages at night, and discovered the joy of waiting for a reply. Even then, I was cautious, telling myself it was just friendship, a nice distraction from routine. But my heart knew better. Every time his name appeared on my screen, something inside me lit up, like a candle in a quiet room. One day, after work, he asked if I'd like to get coffee with him. It wasn't a big fancy dinner or a dramatic confession, just coffee at a small cafe 2 streets away. We sat by the window, watching people pass by, and talked about everything and nothing. He made me laugh with his stories of awkward childhood moments and shared his dreams of traveling to small towns no one writes about. I listened, and in listening, I found myself seeing the world through his words. In those first days, love felt like a secret garden only we knew existed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even fully spoken. It was in the way he waited for me outside the shop, holding a paper cup of tea because he remembered I didn't like coffee too strong. It was in the way our walks became a little slower, as if both of us didn't want the evening to end. It was in the simple text messages, "Did you get home safe?" or "Saw something today that reminded me of you." One moment stands out in my mind like a painting frozen in time. It was a Sunday afternoon, and we were walking through a quiet park. The sky was a soft blue, the kind that makes you think anything is possible. We found a bench near a small lake, and for a few minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It felt full of questions we were too shy to ask and answers we weren't ready to hear. I remember feeling his hand brush against mine, not quite holding it, just touching. My heart beat so loudly I wondered if he could hear it. And when our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us, something that said, "I feel it too." I didn't know where this new beginning would take us. And maybe that's what made it so beautiful. Love didn't need a map or a plan. It only needed 2 hearts brave enough to admit they cared. At night, lying in bed, I'd replay our conversations in my mind, smiling at the small details, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, how he spoke softly as if every word mattered, and the way he listened, really listened when I spoke. The unexpected beginning of love taught me something precious, that sometimes the most beautiful things happen when you stop searching, when you let life surprise you. I didn't fall in love because I had planned it. I fell in love because in the middle of my ordinary days, someone made me feel seen, truly seen, for who I was, not for who I tried to be. And so, those first days of love became more than just memories. They became a reminder that life often saves its sweetest gifts for the moments when we least expect them. For Mary, it all started with a simple question in a quiet bookshop, a shy smile, and a voice that made her heart pause. And from that pause, love quietly began to grow, softly, bravely, beautifully. The first days of love are like standing at the edge of something beautiful yet unknown. You feel the wind on your face, you hear your heart racing, but you're not sure whether to step forward or stay where it feels safer. That's exactly how it felt for me. Mary, a dance of hope and fear, laughter mixed with quiet worry, and a tenderness so delicate that it felt as though even speaking it aloud might break it. After that unexpected beginning in the bookshop, the days that followed became a blur of soft moments and stolen glances. Ethan and I would meet after work, sometimes in the same bookshop where it all began, other times at a little cafe that smelled of cinnamon and freshly baked bread. There was something strangely comforting in knowing that at the end of a long day, there was someone waiting. Not because they had to, but because they truly wanted to. But alongside that comfort was an ache, a quiet uncertainty that shadowed every smile and every word. I remember lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, asking myself questions that had no answers. Does he feel the same way? Am I reading too much into these moments? Is it too soon to hope for something more? Love, in its first days, rarely comes with certainty. Instead, it brings 1,000 tiny doubts and questions that make the heart both light and heavy at once. One evening, after we'd finished our tea, we walked side by side through the city streets. The air smelled faintly of rain, and the streetlights reflected on the wet pavement like tiny stars. I remember wanting so badly to reach out and hold his hand, but something stopped me. A mixture of shyness and fear that maybe he didn't want that yet. Instead, I kept my hands in my coat pockets, silently wishing he would make the first move. And he didn't. But what I didn't realize then was that maybe he was fighting the same battle of uncertainty inside his own heart. The beautiful uncertainty was in everything. The way our conversations would slow down, and both of us would glance away, each lost in unspoken thoughts. The way I caught him looking at me sometimes, his eyes soft but unsure, as if he too was wondering what this was becoming. And the way my chest tightened every time I saw his name appear on my phone, because even a simple message from him could brighten an entire day.
I remember one Saturday when we decided to visit an old part of the city, a place filled with narrow cobbled streets, small art galleries, and hidden courtyards. It felt like stepping into another time. We wandered aimlessly, our laughter echoing off the old brick walls. At one point, we stumbled upon a tiny garden tucked behind an iron gate, filled with wildflowers and ivy-covered benches. We sat there for a while, surrounded by silence and the scent of flowers. In that quiet garden, the uncertainty felt almost gentle, like a secret shared between us and the world. I wanted to tell him everything I felt, that my heart beat faster around him, that I thought of him in the quiet moments before sleep, that even his smallest gestures mattered to me more than I could say. But the words stayed in my heart unspoken, because sometimes love in its earliest days is too delicate to name. I wondered if he felt the same hesitation. Perhaps he worried about seeing too much too soon. Perhaps he feared that rushing could ruin something so beautifully fragile. And so we sat there in silence, speaking only through shared smiles and the occasional brush of shoulders. In those moments, I realized that love isn't always loud declarations or grand gestures. Sometimes it is patience, waiting for the right moment to speak what's in your heart. The uncertainty also showed itself in smaller, sweeter ways, like when he'd send me a message late at night that simply said, "Are you awake?" And my heart would skip because I knew it meant he was thinking of me too. Or when we'd say goodbye at the bus stop, both of us lingering, wanting to stay just a little longer, but unsure how to ask. Those moments were filled with questions neither of us dared to ask out loud. Do you feel what I feel? Are we falling or are we just friends? Yet strangely, I grew to love that uncertainty. It made every smile feel like a gift, every meeting an unexpected joy. The doubt made the moments of connection even sweeter. When his hand finally brushed against mine and didn't move away, my heart nearly stopped. It wasn't a confession, but it was enough to make me hope a little more. And hope, in those days, felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. One evening, after a particularly long day, we met at our usual cafe. I remember feeling tired and quiet, unsure what to say. Ethan noticed, and instead of asking questions, he just sat there with me, our silence unforced and comfortable. In that moment, I realized that love isn't only about laughter and excitement. It's also about being with someone who makes silence feel safe. The uncertainty didn't disappear, but for a while, it softened. As the days passed, my feelings grew stronger, and so did the fear. What if I confessed and he didn't feel the same? What if this gentle beginning ended before it truly started? At night, I'd replay our conversations in my mind, looking for hidden meanings in his words and gestures. I'd remember the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the way his laughter seemed louder around me, and I'd let myself hope. But hope was always balanced by doubt. That's the beautiful contradiction of the first days of love. It lifts you and scares you all at once. It makes your heart race with joy and ache with worry. And yet, even with all the questions, I wouldn't have traded those days for anything. They taught me that love isn't about having all the answers. It's about being brave enough to feel deeply, even when you're unsure. Then came a day I will never forget. It was late, the sky painted with soft pink and gold as the sun set. We were walking by the river, the air filled with the scent of water and summer flowers. Ethan stopped and turned to me, his face uncertain but sincere. "Mary," he said softly, "sometimes I don't know what this is between us, but I know I don't want it to end." My heart felt so full, it almost hurt. I didn't have the perfect words to reply, but I didn't need them. I simply nodded and whispered, "Me too." It wasn't a confession of love, not exactly, but it was a shared truth, an acknowledgement that we were both caught in the same beautiful uncertainty. Looking back, I realized those days were precious precisely because of the doubt. They were the days when every small gesture mattered deeply, when every glance felt loaded with meaning. They were days of learning to be brave in small ways, by showing up, by hoping, by silently wishing for more. In the end, the beautiful uncertainty didn't stop love from growing. It made it real, human, and tender. And though my heart still held questions, I discovered that sometimes love isn't about knowing exactly where you stand. It's about walking forward anyway, hand in hand, hearts quietly hoping that somehow you'll find the answers together. In those first days of love, before any declarations were spoken aloud, I began to notice something magical. The quiet language that lived in the spaces between our words. I called them silent promises, soft, invisible threads that tied two hearts together without either of us fully realizing it. These promises weren't written or spoken. They lived in glances, small gestures, shared silences, and in the gentle certainty that somehow, even without saying it, we both knew what we were starting to feel. One evening, after a long, tiring day, Ethan and I met at our usual cafe. The rain was falling outside, tapping gently against the window, making the whole world feel softer and quieter. I remember sitting there, feeling worn out, not in the mood to talk much. Yet when he arrived, he didn't push me to speak. He simply smiled, sat beside me instead of across, and let the silence wrap around us like a warm blanket. I looked at him and he just nodded, as if to say, "It's okay. You don't always have to talk." That was a silent promise, the promise that I could be myself around him, even on days when words felt heavy. We never spoke about what we were to each other, not at first, but there was this unspoken agreement, a quiet bond growing stronger with every small act of kindness. Like the time we were walking through a crowded street, and he instinctively moved closer so I wouldn't be pushed by the crowd. Or when he remembered, without me reminding him, that I liked my tea without sugar and ordered it that way. Small things, almost invisible to anyone else, yet they whispered louder than any love poem. I remember one afternoon especially well. We were in that little bookshop where we'd first met. The shopkeeper knew us by then and greeted us with a smile. As we wandered between the shelves, my hand brushed against an old book whose title I'd once mentioned to Ethan in passing. Without a word, he gently took the book from the shelf and placed it in my hands. I looked up at him, surprised, and he just shrugged, smiling a little shyly. In that moment, I understood. Love sometimes isn't spoken because it doesn't need to be. His memory of my words, his quiet way of making me feel seen, that was a promise that he was listening, that he cared. Often, I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. His gaze wasn't the gaze of someone who simply liked what they saw. It was deeper, filled with curiosity and something tender I couldn't quite name. I'd pretend not to notice, my heart beating faster, but inside, I'd feel a warmth spread through me, knowing that in his eyes, I was someone worth noticing, someone worth remembering. And then there were the moments when neither of us dared to speak, but everything felt perfectly understood. Like the evening we watched the sunset from a quiet park bench. The sky turned shades of pink and orange, and the air felt thick with words we didn't know how to say yet. His hand rested close to mine, so close our fingers almost touched, and for a long while we just sat there, breathing in the same rhythm. We didn't need to speak. The silence itself was filled with promises that this moment mattered, that we both wanted it to last. Sometimes those silent promises were wrapped in laughter. Ethan had this way of making even the dullest moments light up with humor. Like when I spilled coffee on my scarf, and instead of making me feel clumsy, he turned it into a shared joke we'd laugh about later. It wasn't just what he said that made me feel closer to him. It was how he made me feel in those moments. Safe, seen, and somehow special. At night, I'd lie awake, replaying these tiny moments in my mind. The way he'd hold the door open just a little longer so I could walk through first. Or how he'd text me, "Get home safe," even on the shortest walks home. They might seem ordinary to someone else, but to me, they were like tiny stars lighting up the darkness of doubt. They were his way of saying, without saying it, "I care about you. You matter to me." Looking back, I realize love often starts not with grand confessions, but with these small, quiet promises. A hand offered when you're tired, a memory of something you said weeks ago, or a look that lingers just a little too long. And though words would come later, in those early days, the silent promises felt more real than anything either of us could have said aloud. One rainy afternoon, as we walked under a single umbrella, our shoulders brushing with every step, I felt his hand lightly graze mine. Neither of us moved away. The city felt quieter under the rain, and in that moment, it was as if the rest of the world faded. Without speaking, without even looking directly at each other, we made a promise to let whatever this was continue, to let it grow slowly, carefully, without rushing or forcing it into something it wasn't ready to become. What made these silent promises beautiful was that they came without expectation. He didn't promise forever. I didn't ask for certainty. Instead, we promised each other something far more precious: honesty, kindness, and the courage to keep showing up, even when the path was unclear. That, I think, is where real love begins, not in the grand words, but in the daily choice to keep caring. There were moments when I felt my fears rise again. Fear of getting hurt, fear of caring too much. But every time, Ethan's quiet actions pulled me back. Like when he stayed with me after a rough day at work, not trying to fix anything, just being there. Or when he noticed I was cold and gently placed his scarf around my neck, his fingers brushing my hair. No words were needed. His touch said everything. One night, as we parted ways under the soft glow of streetlights, I hesitated before saying goodbye. We looked at each other, and for a heartbeat, the world felt suspended. I could see in his eyes the same question that was in my heart. Are we ready to say it? But the words didn't come. Instead, he softly touched my shoulder and whispered, "Take care, Mary." And I nodded, whispering back, "You too." Even without the words, "I love you," it felt like we'd shared something just as deep, a promise to keep walking this uncertain path together. With time, words would come. We'd learn to say what our hearts felt, to confess love openly. But in those first days, it was the silent promises that built the foundation. They taught me that love doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it speaks best in a quiet voice, in a gentle look, or in a simple act of kindness. And now, when I look back on those days, I realize they were the most delicate part of our story. They were the days that taught me to listen, not just with my ears, but with my heart. To see love in what is done, not only in what is said. And to trust that sometimes the words we long to hear are already there, softly woven into every shared smile, every thoughtful gesture, and every silent promise. In the end, love began for me not with declarations, but with 1,000 small, quiet vows, whispered not in words, but in actions that said again and again, "I'm here. I care." And though I might be afraid to say it out loud just yet, my heart is speaking to yours. That, I've come to believe, is the truest promise of all.